So glad you could join us here on a Thursday. I'm Marlon Bowling with you, watching your ag commodity trade as we get ready for the daytime session. We actually had a firmer tone overnight. Grain markets rebounded just a little bit, and we'll cover that in just a little bit. We also just got some new export sales numbers out, and to comment on that, let's bring in Rich Nelson of Allendale Incorporated. He's based in McHenry, Illinois. All right, Rich, a lot to talk about here this morning on a Thursday. We have all these new USDA numbers that came out in our export sales report, the weekly edition, and any surprises in that report as far as you're concerned?
You know, for the most part, I got to say the numbers on the corn sales, only 92,000 tons of old crop sales. Good on the new crop here, but old crop sales may be a little weak. I don't know if the trade's going to get too concerned about that issue, though. But on the soybean side, 835,000 tons across the board. Within the trade's expectations, we will point out that the new crop number is still a little weak. In fact, we're still at about 10-year lows in terms of new crop bookings. Meal, 62,000 tons on this one. Not too much to look at as far as a big surprise. Oil, 15,000 tons. And over on the wheat, about 498,000 tons of this current crop sales here. So, okay as far as that goes.
So the wheat sales were a little lower than last week, but, you know, we're just kind of getting started, I guess, on the marketing year for the wheat right now. I wanted to ask you about that. The latest numbers coming in out of the spring wheat tour. Any surprises in that regard?
You know, we were kind of braced for some concerns about these numbers that we're going to release on the day two as they go into the more of the drier areas. Overall, though, 35.8 bushels, and this, of course, was a little under the last year, which was, of course, a record 46.9 day two finding, and still also under the 5-year average of 46.6. So definitely on this one, they are finding some problems. Maybe not as much as they're expecting in some areas, but certainly for the overall day two finding, you got to argue that would imply some serious issues that can't be returned right now.
All right. Now, we talked about the export sales on the corn, the soybeans, and the wheat. We also had some on grain, sorghum, cotton, and also on rice as well. And just wanted to run through those for everybody. On the grain sorghum, it was way down to 52,000 tons this time around. If memory serves me right, I think it was over 100,000 last week. Upland cotton, 260,900 running bales. That's combining both marketing years. And the rice, 59,800 tons this time around. On the overnight trade, let's take a look at the Globex market here, Rich. And we did have a firmer tone in the corn, soybeans, and the wheat. On the corn at last check, we were 3 higher in December at 389. In the soybean trade, let's look at November soybeans, where we're trading 8 higher at last check. That would be at 10.08 and a quarter. That's a full dime off of its earlier low of the session, and you know, actually pretty close to the high. And if you look at the wheat, here we had the Chicago September wheat showing a trade that was higher on the evening as well. We had Kansas City wheat that was firmer. So we had it trading about 5.5 higher at 481. So anyway, with your take on the overnight trade, is that something that now that the export sales are out, do you think they can build on that, or will that affect that at all?
You know, I guess for at least this discussion point, I think they will kind of ignore these export sales. As for the most part, they were within the trade expectations and no real major surprises. So I would say definitely that weather's still running the show right now, and maybe a slight premium here today just based on these slight disappointing sales here seen in some areas overnight here.
All right, and Minneapolis wheat up about 7.5 cents in the overnight trade. We'll get things opening up here on the daytime session in about 10 or 11 minutes. In the meantime, we'll pause for a break, and Rich will come back and talk about that livestock trade yesterday when we come back on the other side. We're talking with Rich Nelson of Allendale Incorporated. He's based in McHenry, Illinois, and we were talking about our overnight trade, also our weekly export sales numbers that came out from USDA. And before we can talk about our livestock trade here for today here, Rich, I wanted to point out we also had some news just coming across the wire from USDA. Fairly sizable amount of soybeans sold overnight, huh?
Exactly right here. As far as the numbers, the trade's looking at a total of 264,000 tons. Pretty impressive that actually the bulk of that, 198,000, was actually old crop sales, which is a little surprising for this time of year. 66,000 tons of new crop. And as far as the old crop sale, why it was so large? Well, maybe because we actually are at a good discount to Brazil right now, of all things. Last bid out of the U.S. Gulf, $386 per metric ton. Brazil, I have them at $392. So we're actually a little better price than Brazil right now.
Okay, now I want to get your thoughts on this livestock trade here, where we had a bit of a turnaround to the upside in most of the cattle contracts yesterday. So that's a bit of a change from what we have had in earlier days. So what do you expect to see out of this today?
As far as today's discussion, I will point out the export sales for beef were maybe a little disappointing. Only about 14,000 metric tons. I call that disappointing because it was about a third lower than last year in the exact same week. So we've got some good futures action from yesterday. We have some cash trade anywhere from this 117, 118 range in most areas. Would expect kind of a mixed tone as far as today on the cattle end of things here. As far as the pork side of things here, 19,000 tons of export sales are noted. That was a full 78% over last year. So good pork sales might add a little support to the pork end of things here today.
I see the biggest buyers on the beef side would be South Korea. On the pork side, it was Mexico and Japan. I don't see China in there.
At this point, that's actually a great point. A lot of people are still pointing out that we haven't seen this big China buy that many people hope to see. And bottom line for that is the simple fact we don't have the number of cattle qualifying for their export program. I would think that by 2018, we'll certainly see some better action here.
So you think that's going to be a little while. Now, on midday yesterday here, Rich, we were reporting that USDA had pegged the pork belly market about $12.50 higher, and then it was way off of that when we got to the afternoon trade. Can you explain that?
Well, as far as the pork belly side, because there are actually so few, so little meat that qualifies for USDA's very specific clarification on that wholesale pork report, that we do get these amazing kind of jumps. And keep in mind, a lot of the pork bellies are traded. You have your options of skin on, skin off. You've got your options as far as the different pumping blends that they use there as well. So to meet USDA's qualifications for that, you're only seeing a small portion of the actual pork belly trade qualify.
Well, thanks for explaining that. That was extremely interesting. If nothing else, it made for some great talking points yesterday. Other than the factors that we covered here, are you looking at any outside markets for any market direction today or not?
As far as today's discussion on the outside markets, I think we're going to see mostly more of a mixed trade. Keep in mind the Federal Open Market Committee, the Federal Reserve, they basically said no change in interest rates. The trade was expecting that type of announcement. So for the rest of this week, I look for maybe more of a mixed trade on the outside markets here.
Excellent stuff. Thank you, Rich. Appreciate it again. Rich Nelson of Allendale Incorporated in McHenry, Illinois. Janet, we're getting close, about 5.5 minutes away from opening bell.
Get another day underway.
Yep.
Thank you very much, Marlon.